In a relentless $500 billion campaign, China is aggressively redrawing the world map, building massive artificial islands in the South China Sea. Starting in 2014, their engineering fleets achieved the impossible, fabricating over 4 square kilometers of brand new sovereign territory in just 1 year. The process begins by meticulously scanning the seabed, targeting submerged coral reefs and shallow underwater rocks for total geographical transformation. Specialized hydrotechnical concrete is dropped into the ocean, followed by monstrous dredging machines that pump millions of tons of sand. By washing giant sand masses onto these fragile shoals, Beijing artificially multiplies its landmass to dominate the surrounding strategic waters.
While China previously expanded coastlines near Guangzhou for civilian growth, these new offshore outposts serve highly aggressive military and geopolitical objectives. Their primary target involves establishing absolute control over disputed archipelagos like the Paracel Islands, militarizing formerly neutral territories. This unprecedented expansion has ignited fierce clashes, with 6 regional states, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan, fighting to defend their maritime rights. The stakes are incredibly high. Every single year, a staggering $3 trillion worth of global goods passes directly through this maritime choke point. This vital shipping lane connects the Far East to Europe, meaning whoever controls these artificial islands holds the key to global trade.
But this high-stakes geopolitical gamble isn't just about controlling global shipping lanes. The South China Sea hides a phenomenal, untapped underwater treasure. Beneath the seabed lies an estimated 18 billion barrels of crude oil, transforming these contested waters into one of the planet's most lucrative energy reserves. Furthermore, it serves as a massive biological engine. These intensely disputed waters are incredibly rich fishing grounds, essential for feeding surrounding nations. Regional economies face existential threats if these routes are choked. Japan alone relies on this exact maritime corridor for a staggering 80% of its energy imports. For Beijing, the stakes are equally critical. Roughly 60% of China's entire foreign trade is heavily tied to the smooth functioning of this volatile ocean.
Securing absolute dominance here is the cornerstone of China's 21st century maritime Silk Road, pouring billions into a grand master plan known as the Belt and Road Initiative. Ironically, for centuries, the Paracel and Spratly archipelagos were ignored, barren coral reefs and tiny atolls barely protruding above the crashing waves. Their immense strategic value was only violently realized during World War II, when the Japanese Empire occupied these isolated patches of land for military outposts. After Japan's defeat, the ownership of these 250 micro-islands was left dangerously unresolved, creating a massive geopolitical vacuum waiting to be exploited. As regional ambitions grew rapidly in the late 20th century, it became terrifyingly clear that surrounding states were ready to fight and even die for it.
Amidst Cold War rivalries, the South China Sea became a chaotic chessboard of clashing superpowers and regional factions. Ignoring international norms, Beijing enforced the controversial 9-dash line, aggressively claiming sovereignty over 90% of these waters. This massive overreach triggered furious pushback from neighboring states, including Vietnam and the Philippines, who laid their own claims. Tensions reached a boiling point in 1974, erupting into a deadly naval battle between China and South Vietnam. After securing these territories, Beijing patiently bided its time before launching a devastatingly rapid militarization campaign in 2013.
While officially claiming to build civilian weather stations, China was secretly engineering full-scale military bases right on the water. Advanced communication centers, air defense systems, and massive radar arrays completely replaced the once pristine coral ecosystems. These floating fortresses allow China to project devastating military power and secure its trade routes against any potential crisis. Recognizing the existential threat to global trade, Western powers sounded the alarm, leading to the historic AUKUS alliance. Driven by Australia, Britain, and the US, this pact deploys nuclear submarines to directly counter Chinese dominance. Furious at the AUKUS alliance, Beijing fiercely protests this containment strategy while aggressively doubling down on its island-building campaign. Defying international warnings, China continues to heavily fortify these highly controversial territories with unwavering determination and massive military might. In response to this immense pressure, neighboring nations like Vietnam are silently reinforcing their own outposts, albeit on a much more modest scale. Yet amidst these relentless geopolitical power plays, the most tragic casualty remains entirely silent: the fragile marine ecosystem. Countless vibrant coral reefs, cultivated by nature over millennia, have been utterly obliterated under millions of tons of suffocating industrial sand. Refusing to cede control, the United States military routinely and defiantly dispatches heavily armed warships straight into these contested waters.
These aggressive maneuvers are designed to directly challenge Beijing's territorial claims, resulting in terrifyingly close military encounters. Today, the South China Sea has transformed into a high-stakes arena where the world's most powerful militaries constantly test each other's limits. The global community watches in sheer anxiety, dreading that a single miscalculation here could ignite the next catastrophic international conflict. What started as an engineering marvel has morphed into a $500 billion powder keg floating menacingly in the middle of the ocean.